He abandoned his father and expelled his sister. But what he found years later shocked the entire town. The old wooden house on Hawthorne Street had once been the pride of the Beaumont family. Now it stood in silence, wrapped in the cold judgment of time. Jacob Beaumont, a rising financial analyst with impeccable suits and a calendar filled with meetings, found no use for a father who moved slowly, forgot dates, and spoke more about memories than markets. "Dad, this isn't working anymore," Jacob had said sternly one morning, not even looking up from his phone. Walter Beaumont, once a respected schoolteacher, now with trembling hands and gentle eyes, nodded slowly. "If this is what you believe is best." Jacob didn't respond. Within a week, Walter was placed in the West Ridge Retirement Facility, a pristine building with polished floors and sterile smiles. "It's for his own good," Jacob reassured himself as he signed the papers. But his sister, Elise, stormed into his office 2 days later. "You didn't even talk to me," she cried. "You sent Dad away like he was an old coat you outgrew." Jacob didn't flinch. "He needs care, professional care. And you've always been the emotional one. We need decisions, not feelings." Elise glared at him, then slammed a folder on his desk. "You don't even know the truth, but maybe one day it'll slap you in the face." Jacob tossed the folder aside without opening it. Later that night, after a glass of whiskey and 2 ignored calls from Elise, Jacob called security. "My sister no longer lives here. If she shows up, I want her escorted out." Elise never returned. The family broke quietly, without ceremony or closure. Years passed. Jacob climbed corporate ladders, bought a penthouse downtown, and forgot about the old house, the retirement home, and Elise. Until one day, a letter arrived, a handwritten envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo of his father, smiling wide, holding the hand of a young boy. On the back, it read, "Thank you for leaving. It gave me the freedom I never had." Jacob froze. The boy, he had never seen him before. That night he barely slept. Something gnawed at the back of his mind. He called West Ridge the next morning. "I'd like to check on Walter Beaumont." There was silence on the line. Then a soft voice answered, "Mr. Beaumont left the facility 5 years ago." Jacob's heart stopped. "Left? Left to where?" We don't know, sir." He signed himself out. Jacob sat down slowly, the weight of the past clawing its way back. The folder Elise left, the boy in the photo, his father's sudden departure. Everything was unraveling. And deep down, he knew. The truth he never cared to discover was about to explode. Jacob's hands trembled as he opened the drawer where he had carelessly thrown Elise's folder all those years ago. Dust had settled over it like a curse, untouched, unremembered. He pulled it out, heart pounding as he flipped it open. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a birth certificate. But the name on the document sent a jolt through his spine. Elijah Beaumont, son of Walter Beaumont and Sarah Mendez. Jacob blinked. Who is Sarah? One of the photos showed Walter, years younger, holding a baby in front of a modest brick house with Elise smiling beside them. Another showed Elise and a boy around 10 years old, laughing in a park. Jacob shook his head. "Impossible! I would have remembered this." He never did. Elise was always the caretaker, the warm one, the sister who stayed behind while he left for college. She had been there for every birthday, every hospital visit, every lonely Christmas. He had only visited when he needed something signed or money transferred. Jacob pulled out his phone and searched the name Sarah Mendez. It led nowhere. Then he tried Elijah Beaumont, nothing. But deep down, he knew what he had to do. He called Elise. It rang once, twice, voicemail. "Elise, it's me. I need to talk. Please call me back." He hung up. The silence in his apartment grew heavier. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. Instead, he grabbed his keys and drove through the night, heading back to the house on Hawthorne Street. It looked even smaller now, more broken. The paint peeled from the sides, the windows fogged with time. He knocked. No answer. He peeked through the glass. Empty. The next day, he visited the last known address from the facility's record, a small community on the edge of town, built for senior retirees who wanted to live off the grid. He showed the photo of Walter to a woman tending her garden. Her eyes lit up. "Oh yes, that's Walt. Sweetest man you'd ever meet. Used to play harmonica for the kids every Sunday. Lived in cabin 9. Jacob's chest tightened. "Is he still there?" The woman looked down. "I'm afraid he passed away last year, peacefully in his sleep." The words knocked the air from Jacob's lungs. "Did he ever mention a boy? Elijah?" The woman smiled gently. "That's his grandson. Well, kind of. He raised him like one. Boy was a prodigy, said he wanted to build something big one day. Moved to the city last summer, I think. You know, you look a lot like him." Jacob stood there, stunned, as if the world had tilted beneath his feet. He turned toward the cabin. He needed to see where his father had spent his final days. The door was unlocked. Inside, the walls were filled with drawings, newspaper clippings, and framed photos. Walter and Elijah, Elise with them, a family Jacob had chosen to erase from his life. On the table, he found a letter addressed to him, his name written in Walter's shaky handwriting. With trembling hands, Jacob opened it. "My son," it began, "I hope one day you come here, not out of guilt, but out of love. I forgive you. Always did. Elijah knows your name, though he's never met you. He asks about his uncle sometimes. I tell him you were once a good man. Maybe you still are. Love, Dad." Jacob sat down and cried for the first time in decades. Outside, the sun began to rise, casting warm light over the cabin, but the warmth couldn't undo what had been done. Not yet. Jacob stayed in the cabin for hours, sitting in silence, surrounded by the remnants of a life he had willfully ignored. He ran his fingers over the photographs, studying each one, as if trying to absorb lost time. One photo in particular stopped him. It showed Walter, Elise, and Elijah standing together in front of a large community center with a banner, "New Beginnings Youth Initiative." Elijah was holding a blueprint, grinning proudly. Jacob's brows furrowed. He flipped the photo over, written in Elise's handwriting, "The future he's building for others." Jacob searched the center's name online. It existed. Downtown. A local program for underprivileged youth, engineering clubs, mentorships, art scholarships, and the founder, Elijah Mendez, not Beaumont. But the picture didn't lie. That boy was his father's legacy. The next morning, Jacob walked through the glass doors of the community center. The walls were painted with murals, children from all walks of life smiling, creating, dreaming. At the front desk, a young woman looked up. "Welcome to New Beginnings. How can I help you?" Jacob cleared his throat. "I'm looking for Elijah Mendez." The woman smiled. "He's in the robotics lab, down the hall, third door on the left." Jacob's footsteps echoed down the corridor. His palms were sweaty. He opened the door. Inside, teenagers were gathered around tables filled with wires and circuit boards. At the center stood a tall young man giving instructions. Confident posture, animated voice. The moment Jacob saw his face, he stopped. The resemblance was undeniable. His father's eyes, Elise's smile. "Elijah?" Jacob said. The young man turned. His expression shifted from curiosity to slight suspicion. "Yes?" Jacob hesitated. I'm Jacob Beaumont." Elijah didn't blink. "I know who you are." Silence fell between them. The students sensed the tension and slowly filtered out. Only the two remained. "I saw the photos," Jacob began. "The letters. I visited the cabin." Elijah crossed his arms. "Why now?" Jacob's voice cracked. "Because I didn't know. I didn't know he left. I didn't know about you, about any of it. I thought I was doing the right thing, putting him in that place. You thought wrong, Elijah snapped. You abandoned him. You abandoned Elise. She raised me. She held us together. You gave up. I know, Jacob whispered. I have no excuse, but I'm here. I want to understand. Help, if you'll let me. Elijah studied him. What changed? Jacob looked away. A photo, a letter, guilt, maybe, or regret, or both. Elijah sighed. You want redemption, but this isn't about you. It never was. Jacob nodded slowly. I know. I just want to do what I should have done years ago. There was a long pause. Then Elijah gestured toward the workshop. You any good with wires? Jacob smiled faintly. Not really, but I'm willing to learn. For the first time, Elijah's face softened. Then start by sweeping the floor. And so Jacob did. Every morning he came back, cleaned, listened, learned. Days turned into weeks. The students warmed up to him. He shared stories about Walter, about the man he once ignored but now longed to know. One day, Elise walked in. Her eyes landed on Jacob. Didn't think you had it in you, she said coldly. I almost didn't, he replied. She walked closer. You still don't know everything. Jacob frowned. What do you mean? Elise looked over at Elijah. He's not just your nephew. Jacob's stomach turned. Elise handed him another envelope. Read it, then we'll talk. Jacob took it with shaking hands. Something told him the real storm was only beginning. Jacob stood frozen in the hallway of the community center, the envelope from Elise burning in his hand. He waited until he was alone in the break room before opening it. Inside, there were only 2 pages. One was a letter, the other a DNA test. The letter was in Elise's handwriting. You never asked questions, Jacob. You were too busy running from the past to notice the present, but you deserve to know the truth now, because Elijah deserves it too. Sarah Mendez was our mother's nurse. After Mom died, Dad was a wreck. He found comfort in Sarah, and for a brief time they were happy. Elijah is not just Dad's grandson, he's your son. Sarah died during childbirth. I raised Elijah with Dad. We didn't tell you because you were already gone. You left us. But maybe now you're ready to be a father if he'll let you. Jacob's heart nearly exploded in his chest. He stared at the DNA results. Paternity test, 99.999% match. His fingers trembled. The room spun. My son, he whispered. My son. All these years, the boy he had dismissed as a stranger had carried his blood. The guilt multiplied tenfold, the arrogance, the distance, the absence. Elise had stepped in where he had failed. Walter had become the father Jacob never was. And Elijah had become everything Jacob had hoped to be. That night, Jacob didn't go home. He sat in his car outside the center, head against the steering wheel, crying like a child. The next morning, he walked back in. Elijah was already there, working with the kids, calm and focused. Jacob waited until lunch to approach him. We need to talk, he said. Elijah nodded and followed him to the rooftop terrace. Jacob handed him the envelope. Elijah opened it silently. His eyes scanned the letter, then the DNA report. His face stayed still. Then he laughed once, bitterly. So it's true, he said. I always suspected, but I never had proof. I asked Aunt Elise once. She said, you'll know when the time is right. I guess this is it. I didn't know, Jacob said softly. I swear to you, Elijah, I didn't know. Elijah looked at him, eyes glistening. But would it have changed anything if you did? Or would you have walked away anyway? Jacob didn't answer. He couldn't. You had a chance to be there, to hold me when I was sick, to see me win my first science fair, to watch me grow. But you chose the other life. Jacob nodded. You're right. I chose wrong. For a long time there was silence between them. Then Elijah asked, why are you really here now? Jacob looked into his eyes. because I want to fix what I broke, not just for me, for you, for Dad, for Elise." Elijah stepped back. "You can't fix it in one day." "I know," Jacob said, "but maybe we can start with one." Elijah stared at him. The wind blew gently across the rooftop. "You want to be my father now?" Jacob shook his head. "I want to earn the right to be called that, if I can." Elijah looked down at the streets below. "Come tomorrow at 6 a.m. I'm starting a new program for kids with no families. Maybe you can show them what not to do." Jacob nodded. "I'll be there." As he turned to leave, Elijah said quietly, "And Jacob, thank you for finally showing up." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. Jacob arrived the next morning at 5:50 a.m., standing outside the center's steel doors with a coffee in each hand and a notebook under his arm. When Elijah opened the door at exactly 6, he raised an eyebrow. "You're early." Jacob managed a faint smile. Didn't want to miss anything. They walked in together. The program was called Next Chance, aimed at guiding teens recently released from foster care or juvenile detention, kids the world had already given up on. Elijah handed Jacob a mop. "Before we change lives, we clean the space." No questions asked, Jacob took the mop and started scrubbing the gym floor alongside the kids. Some of them side-eyed him, others asked bluntly, "Who's the old guy?" Elijah smirked and said, "He's the new intern." Laughter followed, and Jacob, for the first time in decades, laughed with them. Days turned into weeks. Jacob stopped wearing his tailored suits and started listening more than speaking. He mentored a quiet boy named Marcus, who had a knack for coding, but refused to trust anyone. Slowly, Jacob broke through. One afternoon, Marcus whispered, "I thought you were just another fake, but you're different. You stayed." Elise returned to the center often now. Watching her brother work side by side with Elijah made her cautious but hopeful. She approached him one day after a group session. "You're changing," she said. Jacob replied, "I had to lose everything to see what mattered." Elise nodded. "You haven't lost us, not completely, but it's not about what you say anymore. It's what you do." One night, Elijah sat beside Jacob outside the center, both staring at the stars. "I used to think about what I'd say to you if I ever met you," Elijah said. "I imagined screaming, cursing, punching, but now that you're here, I just want to know who you are." Jacob looked up. "I don't fully know yet, but I'm trying to become someone worth knowing, and if you'll have me, maybe one day, worth calling Dad." Elijah looked at him, the anger slowly melting from his gaze. "Don't rush it. Just keep showing up." It was the closest they had come to connection, but something still hung in the air, a mystery Jacob hadn't yet unraveled. Late one evening, he was cleaning out the storage room when he found a locked wooden box labeled WB, Walter Beaumont. Inside were dozens of letters, but one stood out, an envelope marked, "To be read only if Jacob returns." His hands shook as he opened it. The letter read, "My son, if you're reading this, then maybe you finally stopped running. I kept something from you, a truth I could never tell when you were younger. Elise did too. Not out of spite, but out of mercy. You deserve to know who your real mother was. She wasn't the woman you thought she was, and what she did, if it ever comes to light, could change everything you think about your past." Jacob read the rest in stunned silence. His breath caught in his throat. The truth inside that letter wasn't just personal, it was dangerous. And when he looked up, he realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a truth the whole town had tried to bury. Jacob sat on the concrete floor of the storage room, gripping the letter as if it might vanish. The words repeated in his mind like a haunting echo. Your real mother wasn't who you thought, and what she did could change everything. He thought of the woman who had raised him, Margaret Beaumont, strict, cold, but always composed. Could it be that she hadn't been his biological mother? He pulled out the rest of the papers from the box. There were photos, medical records, and another sealed envelope labeled with his birth date. He opened it slowly, revealing a birth certificate. But the name under Mother wasn't Margaret. It was Isabel Reyes. His breath caught. Isabel Reyes was a name he remembered faintly from a heated conversation he once overheard between Elise and Walter when he was 17. But they had stopped speaking the moment they realized he was near. "No," he whispered. "She died, didn't she?" He dug deeper into the box and found a newspaper clipping, old and yellowed. The headline read, "Local woman charged in secret adoption scandal, child illegally transferred." The photo below was of a younger Isabel Reyes being led away in handcuffs. The article said she had taken bribes to secretly place babies in homes through back channels. One of those babies, it hinted, was Jacob. Jacob's world collapsed in on itself. He wasn't a Beaumont by blood. Walter had adopted him, quietly, illegally, through Isabel's underground network. Margaret had raised him to protect the family name, but never truly loved him. That's why she was always distant, why she never looked at him the same way she looked at Elise. He had spent his entire life trying to impress people who had only seen him as a burden to cover up. And now he knew. The next morning, Jacob approached Elise in the garden behind the center. She was watering a row of sunflowers, calm as ever. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked. She looked at him and nodded without emotion. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but Dad said the truth would destroy you." "It didn't destroy me," Jacob said. "It explained everything." Elise set down the watering can. "You're still our brother, Jacob. You were raised as a Beaumont. Dad loved you more than anything." "But I was just a reminder of a lie," he replied. "No," she said firmly. "You were the start of a second chance, for all of us. And you were the one Dad fought hardest to protect." Later that day, Jacob sat with Elijah in the robotics lab, trying to process everything. "You always wanted to know what made me so emotionally blocked," he asked. "It was because I never really belonged. I spent my life performing, hoping someone would finally say, 'You're good enough.' Now I know why they never did." Elijah looked at him with surprising calm. "Maybe now you can stop performing. Just be." But not everyone in town was ready for the truth. When word leaked about the documents Jacob had uncovered, whispers turned to accusations. A local reporter approached the center, asking questions about Walter's involvement in Isabel Reyes's network. A city councilman, once Jacob's client, hinted that if the story made headlines, the center's funding could be in jeopardy. Elijah confronted Jacob. "This is getting bigger than just us." Jacob nodded. "And it's time we face it together." Elise stepped into the room. "I think there's only one way to get ahead of this." "How?" Jacob asked. "We tell the story ourselves, the truth, all of it, on our terms, with our voice." And so they planned a town meeting, one that would shake the ground beneath the old lies. But what none of them knew yet was that someone else, someone from Walter's past, was watching. And that person had no intention of letting the truth come out without a fight. The town meeting was scheduled for Friday evening at the old City Hall, a modest red brick building that once hosted harvest dances and local debates, now bracing to hear a story that could stain the Beaumont name forever. Jacob, Elise, and Elijah prepared everything with precision. Flyers were distributed, a press release was sent, and word of mouth traveled fast. By Thursday night, the whispers had grown into something louder: curiosity, controversy, fear. Jacob stood in the mirror, adjusting his shirt collar. "They're going to hate me," he said aloud. Elise entered the room behind him. "Some will, but others will finally understand what we've been carrying in silence." Elijah appeared in the doorway, holding a small USB drive. "The photos, letters, and the article, you want them in the presentation?" Jacob took a deep breath. "All of it. No more shadows." But just as the three were finishing their final preparations, a black SUV parked across the street from the community center. A tall, sharp-featured woman stepped out. Her name was Celia Torres, a former prosecutor turned politician, and someone who had a long history with the Reyes scandal. She had been the one who covered it up, and if Jacob's story saw the light of day, it would not only ruin her, it would reopen dozens of buried cases. That night, she made a call. "Shut it down," she said coldly. The next morning, a cease and desist letter arrived at the center, signed by Celia herself. "Public defamation," it claimed. "Unauthorized use of court-sealed documents." Jacob stared at the papers in disbelief. "She wants to silence us." Elise leaned over. "She's scared." Elijah looked between them. "What do we do?" Jacob stood, his voice steady. "We go forward. The truth isn't defamation, it's liberation." Elise smiled. That sounded like Dad. Elijah plugged in the USB. "Then let's do this for him." The meeting room was packed. Former students, town elders, curious neighbors, reporters. The lights dimmed, and the screen flickered to life. Jacob stepped onto the stage, trembling slightly. He looked out over the crowd. "My name is Jacob Beaumont. For most of my life, I believed I knew who I was. A successful man, a son, a brother. But the truth is, I was born from a lie." Gasps filled the room. He continued, revealing everything: his real mother, the adoption ring, Walter's silent sacrifice, Elise's unshakable loyalty, and Elijah, his son. When the slides ended, Jacob stepped aside. Elijah took the microphone. "I grew up without a father, but I had my grandfather. I had my aunt, and I had a truth I was told to hold back, to protect those who ran from it. But silence keeps injustice alive. So today, we break that silence." Applause broke out, then shouting, questions, anger, emotion. But amid the chaos, one hand rose quietly. A woman in her 80s. "I knew Isabel Reyes," she said. "She saved my daughter's life. She wasn't a criminal. She was forced into that ring by people who now sit in power. And Walter, he wasn't hiding shame. He was protecting lives." Suddenly the room changed. Testimonies began to pour out. Others who had been adopted under suspicious circumstances, those who knew more than they'd ever said. The community, once buried under secrets, began to stir. But outside, Celia Torres watched from her SUV, lips tight. Her phone buzzed. A voice on the other end whispered, "We have a problem. The files were leaked online." Celia's face drained of color. "Who?" The voice replied, "Your own secretary. She was adopted too. She wanted justice." And just like that, the town didn't just hear the truth. It became the truth. 3 weeks had passed since the town meeting, and nothing in Hawthorne was the same. The newspaper headline read, "Beaumont Truth Exposes Decades-Old Adoption Scandal." The community had rallied behind the family. Elijah's center received an outpouring of donations. Volunteers showed up in record numbers, and people who had long suffered in silence began telling their stories. But the real storm was only beginning. Jacob sat with Elise and Elijah in the old cabin Walter had once called home. The three were surrounded by boxes of old documents and new letters from across the country. Victims, survivors, truth-seekers. Jacob stared at one in particular. A letter with no return address, just a simple message inside. "Your mother is alive. She's been watching you your whole life." Jacob's jaw clenched. "Is this real?" Elise picked up the envelope, examining it. Elijah searched the handwriting. "That's not Celia's pen, it's someone else." Then, before anyone could speculate further, Jacob's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Jacob," the voice on the other end said. Female, soft but clear. "Please don't hang up." "Who is this?" he asked. "It's Isabel. I'm your mother." The room fell silent. Jacob stood up, stunned. "Where are you?" She hesitated. Close. I've been following everything. You were never supposed to find out like this, but the moment you stood up at that town hall, I knew you were strong enough. He swallowed hard. Why? Why did you disappear? Why let them lie to me? Her voice cracked. Because they threatened to kill you. Celia Torres and her people. When I tried to expose the ring, they told me I had two choices: disappear or bury you in a closed adoption and pretend it never happened. Walter saved your life. He took you in at the risk of everything. And then he protected me too. I've been in hiding ever since. Elise's eyes filled with tears. She's alive. Jacob nodded slowly. She is, and she's been protecting me this whole time. Elijah whispered, "That's the final piece, isn't it?" They arranged to meet in a secluded cafe outside town the next day. When Isabel walked through the door, Jacob stood frozen. She looked older, her hair silver, but her eyes were identical to his. No longer a ghost, now a truth in the flesh. They embraced for the first time, mother and son, 38 years after they were torn apart. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," he replied. "You gave me life, and now you've given me the truth." Back in Hawthorne, Celia Torres was arrested after the secretary leaked audio recordings of years of blackmail and judicial tampering. The investigation uncovered a trail of stolen identities, bribed judges, and fake death certificates, all tied to the illegal adoption ring Isabel had once tried to expose. In the center's courtyard, a new mural was painted, Walter at the center holding the hands of two children, Jacob and Elise on one side, Elijah and Isabel on the other. Above them it read, "Truth will always rise." That night, Jacob gave a speech during the dedication ceremony. "This isn't a story about blood," he said. "It's a story about choices, about finding truth, even if it shatters the life you thought you knew. And most of all, about second chances." As the crowd applauded, Elijah stood beside him. For the first time he leaned in and whispered, "Dad." Jacob turned, his eyes misty. "Yeah, son? Let's go home." And the town, once buried in silence, was reborn in truth. Because the son who had sent his father away had finally become the man his father always believed he could be.